Hi everyone! Today we're here with Tiago to talk about another project. Hi Tiago!
Hi everyone.
So this project is a bit different than most of our projects, and it's also an extension of another project that we have ongoing. So maybe could you start by telling us a bit how we even got into this project to begin with?
Yes, I think it's a really exciting project, and I think the way it came about is also quite nice. It involved a lot of thinking and brainstorming. So this was at the time where myself and Hannah, we were essentially trying to look for all kinds of project opportunities, and one way we sort of tried to be a bit more systematic about that is we thought we could focus on species and trying to look for species that would either have an outsized impact on the ecosystem, so keystone species, or species that would, other than helping the ecosystem locally, would also benefit the climate, and also species that were forgotten about. So these neglected species where no one was really paying attention to them, and where just a little bit of funding could go a long way. And so the nice thing is that we had this huge board where we had all kinds of species with research articles about the different species. We were exploring different things, and the termites sort of popped out as one where it actually sort of fits these three different criteria. We were sort of looking at them separately, but we found some that actually met all these criteria. So yeah, it sort of was really interesting to start exploring it. And maybe at this point it's probably worth explaining why that's the case. Most people probably aren't aware of why a termite can be valuable.
Yeah, I mean termites are usually thought of as destructive, right? So it's interesting.
Yeah, which they are in certain contexts, but sometimes the other side is not so much spoken about. So they in these in tropical and subtropical areas especially, but more widely as well, they they play a really important role in affecting resilience to droughts, and actually shaping the entire ecosystem where they are found, where these mound building termites are found. Because these mounds, they increase the retention of water in the soil, and because the termites forage for plants and they carry them to the mounds, this whole all of these changes, or all of these behaviors, they actually increase the amount of nutrients you find in the soil around the mounds, and so put together, this means that the entire ecosystem is actually more resilient to drought. So you end up having, there's these really interesting studies as well about the spatial arrangement. So you end up having these little islands where you have higher plant diversity, and there are also little areas where when there's a drought, the vegetation manages to survive there, so that then when it rains, it can spread back from those little islands. And this sort of spatial pattern means that as the climate changes and droughts become more frequent, it just gives the ecosystem that little bit of an extra resilience to these changes.
Yeah, wow, that's great. I actually didn't know about this before. It's very interesting. Okay, so you found this species that fit all of what you were looking for. So and what then?
Yes, so at the time we actually had an intern, Zoe, who was helping us for a bit, helping us with this sort of project development and research. And so we tasked her with finding someone who was doing research in this area, who we could partner with to actually start seeing if we could do something with termites. And so she found a researcher in Benin, Ellie, who had just published recently a paper documenting how in Benin, which is an area that's experiencing high rates of desertification, how in the region there you had this effect of the diversity of plants around termite mounds being higher, and the density higher than in surrounding areas. So these kinds of effects. And in the discussion on that paper, he was also already alluding to the potential value of actually including termites actively in restoration efforts to prevent and revert desertification there. So she reached out and we had a meeting, and Ellie was great. We started brainstorming immediately, and then eventually we came to design and develop the first stage of this project.
Okay, so that was a good bridge to the next next topic. So the first stage, what was it all about? So now you have a partner, and then what did you decide to do in this first stage?
So the thing with termites is that like they have been, there's a lot of literature already, like if you look like in a global sense about these the ways that termites can shape their ecosystem, but this will always depend on the specific region you are working on. So what we wanted was to fill in key knowledge gaps about how this is all playing out in Benin, where there's this specific type of degraded land called boe. And so there's a few objectives, and this first stage was really about filling in these knowledge gaps. And the first one is a bit of a practical one as well, which is like how can we actually monitor and survey large areas where we still have these mounds, so that we can see how they are shaping the ecosystem locally. So how is the vegetation associated with the termite mounds or not in this region, and associated with characteristics of the landscape, and how does this change from season to season? So that was sort of the first objective, and looking like through the literature, we came up with this idea because I mean we've also been using drone mapping in our other projects, so we suggested that we do that, included that in the first stage with Ellie, and he was quite excited to try it out, so we included that as one of the objectives. So testing out if we can use drone maps to actually monitor and better understand the way that termites are shaping the ecosystem in this region. So that was one of the objectives, but there's more.
Okay, cool.
It's a very extensive project, so I'll try to break it down. So the other objective is like I quite like it because it's very sort of simple but valuable research. So it's looking at what do these termites actually prefer to feed on. Because if we are to use them, the termites in combination with plants, you have this area that like it's completely degraded, and you're like, okay, how can we start putting the pieces of the puzzle together so that it comes back to life? To do that, we need to understand how the pieces of the puzzle fit together. So a key part of that is understanding, which plants do the termites prefer to feed on. So essentially, it's that second objective is to do these feeding preference tests so that we can understand that. And the final objective of this first stage is to actually try and see if we can get the termites to reproduce in captivity. So the rationale behind that is that if we have them reproducing in the lab, that will make it easier to do things such as a feeding preference test or things like that. It'll be easier to understand them and study them. And it would also be useful if we want to do things like actively introducing certain termite species in certain places and seeing if they establish, so we can start having a better come to grips with how this may be used as a restoration tool, essentially.
Okay, and this stage has already started, right? How long has it been going on?
So we started, I believe, November 2021. We sort of launched, and yes, we've made great progress on many of these fronts. The drones have proven to be useful, and they seem to be associated. We seem to be finding this association between the trees and the termite mounds as expected, especially in areas that have not been disturbed, because except for one area where the disturbance by human activities is so great that the pattern is just destroyed, essentially. But we're still doing, we're like, yeah, that's still ongoing, the mapping and this learning about the spatial patterns. It's not finished, but it's ongoing. And yes, the captive breeding program, not program, like the captive breeding experiments are still ongoing. trying to see if we can manage to achieve that. And we've already learned which kinds of plants the termites prefer to feed on, so that's already useful for stage 2.
Okay. Okay, so now that we have some findings, and even if this project is ongoing, we can start stage 2. So what is this stage 2? What are we gonna do, and why?
Yes, so I think also maybe interesting to point out that at this stage as well, that in stage 1 we already had Caleb's, a master's student in Benin, do his thesis with us on this project. So he already defended his thesis, so he got his master's. And now for stage 2, this will all fall under his PhD thesis. So one thing that I think is great, and I personally get quite excited about, is that the project is also contributing to provide these opportunities so that students can learn, and we can have, you know, the same way that Ellie is now at the university and is publishing papers on these topics, that we have other people and a growing community of people there who have the knowledge, the capacity and the training to do this sort of important and applied research. So and yeah, so this is just the bridge that I think.
Yeah.
So stage 2 is actually to it's essentially to start testing things. So we are doing a small scale but carefully designed ecological restoration trial, which the overall idea is, if we can do this trial to see if we can, starting with a bit of degraded land, can we bring it back to life? That's the essence of it. What I think is quite exciting is if you read the literature on this role of like soil fauna, like termites and things like that, you read a lot about, you know, like, we already know, there's like a lot of evidence that these species are important, but like we just don't have that many people trying to use this sort of the power of these insects, if you might call it that, to actually, in an applied way, you know, to actually see if we can use it as a tool for restoration. So if we are ever going to be able to do that at scale, and if there's something here to that can be useful, we really need to start the trial and error process as soon as possible, because these things are never straightforward. That's something I think is also important to get across. It's not like we found the magic solution to the problems that are being faced there, but as with anything, we need to start with this trial and error process, which is what this stage is about.
So it's like people know that it's useful, but they haven't tested if it's possible to actively apply.
Exactly, yeah. Because it's one thing to know that a species is important in the ecosystem, and it's something else to know that you can use that knowledge to restore an ecosystem. You know, they're related, but they're not the same thing. And this project is really trying to tackle, or this stage at least, trying to tackle that second question, you know, can we actually use this?
Okay, that's great. So what are we doing? What are the interventions? Or maybe you invent something as well. But
yes, it's a bit of both. Inventive interventions.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's a randomized trial where we will be testing different things in different plots of land. To see, so that we get a better understanding of how these different variables can affect the success of restoration. And this involves tree planting, so using tree species that are native to the area and that have been found through previous research that Ellie has done to be among the most resilient to droughts and future climate change. So it's using these trees, planting them in these plots of land, and the planting is to be done with two different techniques, which are traditional techniques that have been developed in this part of the world, in West Africa, to increase the success of tree planting efforts. So these are called Zai and Half Moon, and they have to do with the way you sort of shape the soil around the place where you plant the tree. And the idea is that you create these sort of little basins that accumulate water, and they also prevent runoff. So that you have, you can use this to sort of facilitate the initial stage of restoration. So we'll be, and these have been shown to work well, like in neighboring countries as well, I think in Burkina Faso and other places. But we want to know, side by side in the same place, in a controlled, rigorous experiment, what works best for this region, because it will be really interesting and valuable to know. So that's what. So that's one thing that we're looking at is the type of the traditional technique, which of those works best. We'll also be looking, because we'll be collecting seeds from wild trees, and these seeds, they come in different sizes and shapes sometimes, and so we will be testing if some of those seeds germinate better, and if they the seedlings resulting from those different types of seed, even though they're from the same species, whether they have higher rates of survival or not, because then if we want to do this at a larger scale, we could use that information to choose which seeds to use.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that we will be looking at is, and that's where the termites come in, is if the termites, by starting to have this the trees there, if this, by kickstarting this sort of restoration process, whether we start seeing termites colonize naturally, which perhaps isn't likely or might take a long time, but we want to monitor for that to sort of understand these processes. And then the idea is to, after some time, actually actively translocate or introduce termites into some plots and not others, and then to see if they establish, and if they establish, whether we can start seeing some of the effects that they have in terms of shaping the soil already. So this is it's definitely very experimental. I wouldn't be, we don't really know how it's going to play out, but we'll also be assessing this component of how termites come into play, and that's how we plan to do it.
Okay. That sounds like a very long process, like, that first we plant the trees and then, we see what happens, and then, yeah. So it sounds like it's not going to happen just like that. It's going to take some time. How long is it, like, how long have we planned that this stage 2 will take?
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's starting now, the process, and we have it planned to be running, the monitoring at least until 2026. But we'll also see over time, like, how things progress and whether we need to extend things further, because it's true that even like many, especially when we talk about actually starting to see the effects, for example, of termites, we might have to. Some of those effects will only be, I expect, will only be visible after a relatively long period. So we'll have to sort of adapt as we go. Yeah, and I think that's the thing sometimes with this type of work, which there's sometimes people want quick results and easy answers.
Yeah.
But that's not how this works, and so we just have to start this process, and hopefully, like, because it involves learning and experimenting, it can still provide interesting things along the way for everyone.
Yeah, and any result is a result, right? So whatever happens, it's still good in a way.
Exactly.
I mean, there are better and worse results, but still.
Yeah, exactly. And I have no doubts that this is something worth researching. Like myself, I think this is really something that's worth looking at.
Yeah. So then, are there any risks associated with this project? And what are they? I mean, risks in. Well, I don't know. Maybe you know best how to explain risks and challenges, and like just for the interventions themselves, but maybe also for the species and the area. I mean, there is a reason why there isn't that many termites, or why we need to actively help these termites also, right? So what is that?
Yeah, so I think there are sort of two components to touch on here. So one of them is just the general context of what's happening with land degradation and termites in the region, and essentially the answer there is that things like the practices of burning land and the time of year in which that is done, sometimes damage that's done directly to the termite mounds, because people sometimes even use the soil from the mounds themselves because it is more nutrient rich. They use it for agriculture, so but not really considering the fact that this is not a sustainable solution, because then you lose the benefits of having the termites there.
Yeah.
So those are some of the challenges. Maybe sometimes grazing that's too intensive, so that it's then it's intensive grazing, and then they move on to a different piece of land. But this one was damaged to a point where it won't recover. So it's this process. So those are that's the broad context of the challenges for the ecosystem, and of course climate change as well. It's like this pressure on the system, and more sort of at the social level. I mean, especially the area in the north where a lot of the field work is happening and the monitoring of the termite mounds with the drone mapping. There's also, it's an unstable region. There's problems with terrorism, which means that everything is more challenging. So that's also like definitely something that when you mentioned risk, I thought I had to bring up.
Yeah.
And then the sort of the other component of the answer, I think, has to do with like what's the risk for what we're trying to achieve, like for this project, what are the unknowns, and how could this go wrong, let's say. And my answer to that is that it is a complex experiment that we like. If you read the management plan, which will be available, you'll see that it's
extensive.
yeah, it's an extensive management plan, and it's a complex intervention, and many things have to come together for it for us to extract the lesson that we want. It involves growing seedlings. There's a whole range of things that depend on each other, which have to work out. I mean, Ellie is an expert in this. He knows the species, the region. I mean, we've done the best we can to design this properly, but it's research, and we're dealing with things that we don't know yet. So there's definitely some risks involved with that.
Yeah. So what about these social, or I don't know what to call them, social risks, or maybe not social risk, but like community, that have to do with the community and the local, like you said, people used termite mounds for the soil and things like that. Are there any such aspects in this project that would address these problems as well?
So the idea, the way that the project, we're thinking about linking the project with that issue, is that Ellie is already connected with local communities where you have the termite mounds present, and with NGOs that are also working to try and improve the situation in these areas. So we, by supporting this research and having Ellie and Caleb dedicated to this, the idea is that they will also be able to share best practices with these people, so that whatever lessons we're learning, they can be shared with people on the ground, so that it's not just about the small plots that we're using to test things, where it's mainly about like learning something new, but also creating this whole capacity to share knowledge and to start seeing changes in the field by doing that.
Yeah, that's for sure important. I mean, it's kind of a waste if we just find a way to further something, to address something, if there is then this aspect that kind of undermines that effort, right? So yeah.
Definitely, and yeah, it's not an easy problem to solve. So, but I think this is a very very good thing to be doing, and will contribute in the right direction.
Yeah, okay, so now we've addressed all the risks or talked about them. What about the I don't know, what is the opposite of risks? Like the benefits, I guess. So if this project is successful, if the experiments prove fruitful, or I don't know what to call it, yeah, what would that mean for the ecosystem and for these species, and like in long term, what would you say?
Yeah, we can say like what's the dream, right?
Yeah, right.
So if if we can find ways to essentially bring these degraded lands back to life, and we can communicate that in a way that is engaging for people, and that people can sort of start using this, putting this into practice in a scalable way, that would be incredible. I mean, it's essentially bringing an area that's devoid of life to having life again, and that benefits obviously the ecosystem and biodiversity, but also the people who live there, who can then benefit from some of the products that these trees provide, and if they're used in a sustainable way, such as fruits and materials. If you have grasses again, cattle can graze. So it can have a host of benefits. So the dream is that we make a contribution towards that happening, and wherever that's already happening, that it's done with better knowledge of how it can be done more effectively, and where it's not happening, hopefully we can provide knowledge and inspiration so that this sort of restoration starts happening at scale. And perhaps to dream even bigger, I think, if we publish some interesting results about this in the scientific literature, we can also make a little contribution towards just a field of using soil fauna, and in this case termites, as a tool for ecosystem restoration. So just starting to put this out there, maybe we'll then another researcher somewhere else will be like, oh yeah, we should see if we get the same result, or so we can just sort of stimulate this area of research a little bit more in a global context. So that's like the dream.
So maybe we can rebrand the termite from being destructive to being an ecosystem engineer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That'd be the dream.
Yeah, but that sounds great. So if this experiment is successful, then it can be a method that could spread, that it wouldn't be just us doing it, but that also other people would start doing it. That would be great.
Exactly. So that's for me the exciting thing about thinking about evidence and knowledge as impact as well, is that it can spread far and wide, and have an impact that goes well beyond the specific actions we're doing in the field.
Yeah. Okay, great. Then a question that I know always interests our members. What about a video? Because we don't have a video about this project yet. Is there a plan for having a video?
So the answer to that is we have a plan, and we have some footage. Ellie and Caleb, they have we've left them with a ZV-1, so one of these cameras we use. This doesn't mean anything to anyone else, but we all talk about. So one of these cameras, and also they have the drone there, and we've been speaking with them about like how they can film to bring the members along for the journey, which I think is also one interesting thing, is that this is also a way for them to sort of familiarize themselves with these things, so that it's also, I think, a nice experience of having them try and communicate to the camera to our members.
Yeah.
There is a plan, and there should be a video coming up, but it's just a bit different from some of our other projects. So for example, we can't just like go there and go to the north, for example, because of these issues with terrorism and safety and so on, which are especially problematic if you're not from there.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of challenges, but I'm really excited about actually getting this onto a video so that more people can learn about this project, which I find really exciting.
Yeah, that sounds good. So yeah, do you have anything more you would like to add at this point?
I don't think so. I think we covered it a bit. Well, one thing is it would be interesting to. I'm always interested to hear people's thoughts. So now that we have comments on the app,
Yeah.
If people manage to make it this far into the conversation, or even if they just read a little bit about the project, I'd be really curious to hear what people think. You know, is this a kind of project that you find interesting? Do you have any concerns, any thoughts? And we'll try and answer those.
Yeah, that's good. And also, if anyone wants even more information about this project, we will be adding this stage 2 to the project page of stage 1. So they will both be in the same page, and there will also be this very extensive management plan that we have. So yeah, that's all at our website, mossy.earth, so go check that out. And yeah, I think that's it for us this time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.